What is Bible prophecy? Christ-centered. The most significant truth of prophecy is how it points to Jesus. Mathematicians have noted that the sheer number of messianic prophecies fulfilled by one person, birthplace, manner of death, is statistically impossible by chance. The disclosing of the will and purposes of God through inspired or spirit-filled human beings. The Old Testament emphasizes the importance of prophecy as a means of knowing God. Many Old Testament prophecies find their fulfillment in Jesus Christ. The New Testament sets out the place of prophecy in the life of the Church and gives guidance concerning the use of this gift. The great body of Old Testament prophecy relates directly to the advent of the Messiah, beginning with Genesis 3:15, the first great promise, and extending in ever-increasing fullness and clearness all through to the book of Revelation. Biblical prophecy spans from humanity's first fall to its ultimate restoration, revealing God's redemptive plan across centuries. The most significant prophecies establish a coherent narrative arc from Genesis through Revelation.
And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel.
Every good story begins with a world that works. In the opening pages of Genesis, the world is not broken. It is ordered, purposeful, alive. Humanity isn't scrambling for a meaning, it is given one. Man and woman walk with God, not hidden, not afraid, nothing to fix, nothing to prove. But then a different voice enters the story, not loud, not forceful, just questioning. Did God really say? That question changes everything. Doubt slips in quietly, not by denying God outright, but by adjusting his words. A little added here, a little taken away there. And with that shift, trust fractures. The result isn't just a mistake. It's a rupture. Between humanity and God, between people and creation. Even within the human heart itself, something precious is lost. And then comes the moment you might not expect. God speaks, not first to Adam, not first to Eve, but to the one behind the deception, the serpent. And what he says is not fear, it's confrontation.
And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel.
This is not poetic imagery meant to sound mysterious. It's language of conflict, of opposition, of war. The Hebrew word used here doesn't describe fear. It describes hostility, a decisive break, an ongoing struggle. And notice something important. The curse is not aimed at the woman. It's aimed at the serpent. From this moment forward, Scripture frames history as a conflict between two lines, two seeds. One follows deception, the other carries a promise. The word used for offspring, zerah, is fascinating. In Hebrew, it can mean many or one, a lineage or a single individual. That detail matters, because while this conflict stretches across generations, the story keeps converging. One family, one nation, one line, and eventually, one person.
The prophecy says the serpent will strike the heel, a wound, painful but not final. But the offspring of the woman will crush the serpent's head. That's not a setback, that's a defeat. What's remarkable is when this promise is given. No attempt by humanity to fix what's broken. Before man seeks God, God announces salvation. This is the first prophecy in the Bible. And it doesn't predict dates or kingdoms. It reveals something far more important. Evil will not have the final word, and redemption will come through a human descendant. The New Testament later identifies that descendant clearly, Jesus of Nazareth. Born of a woman, descended through Adam's line, confronts the same enemy described in Genesis. the serpent becomes known by another name, Satan, the deceiver, the adversary. And the conflict continues until the cross. There, the heel is struck. But through that very moment, the serpent's head is crushed. What began in the garden doesn't end there. It echoes through every page of Scripture. This is not mythology, it's the foundation of the biblical storyline. From the very beginning, the Bible claims this. History is not random, evil is not eternal, and the story is moving toward a promised victory. This is where prophecy begins.
The story begins with a garden, a man, a woman, and a serpent. In the perfect creation, Adam and Eve walked with God in fellowship, enjoying the earth as his crowning creation. But temptation entered, and sin followed. Eve was deceived by the serpent, Adam participated, and humanity fell. Yet, even in the midst of this first rebellion, God's voice is clear and purposeful. In Genesis 3:15, God speaks directly to the serpent.
Here, God is the speaker, addressing the serpent, the enemy of all that is good and righteousness. The curse is not aimed at the woman, but at the serpent, setting the stage for a cosmic struggle between evil and humanity. The Hebrew word for offspring, zerah, can refer to a single person or a collective line, and in this promise, the singular pronoun points forward to an ultimate human descendant, Jesus Christ.
From this very first prophecy, several key truths emerge. Salvation originates with God, not with humanity. The victory over evil is assured, and the redemption promised is universal, reaching across all nations and peoples. This promise establishes the framework for the entire biblical narrative. The crushing of the serpent's head represents Christ's ultimate victory through his death and resurrection, while the striking of the heel foreshadows his suffering on the cross, a strike that can be endured but does not stop God's plan. Even at the very beginning, the promise of salvation is embedded in Scripture, a divine hinge upon which all of human history will turn. The beauty of this prophecy is its clarity. Through the woman, sin entered, but through her seed, salvation is promised. The Redeemer comes as one fully human, intimately connected to the race he will save. This is the very first glimpse of the gospel, the first promise that points forward to Jesus Christ, the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan.
How did sin enter the world? From the disobedience in the Garden of Eden, rather than arising from human nature itself, temptation came to them externally. The serpent enticed Eve with the promise that she would become like God, and both Adam and Eve chose to eat the forbidden fruit. This act of disobedience to God's command marked sin's entry into the human family. The consequences were immediate and profound. Adam and Eve fled from God's presence and were subsequently expelled from Eden, severing their access to divine communion. Their descendants inherited this condition, with sin spreading throughout humanity as each generation descended from Adam became infected with sinfulness.
The core truth of Genesis 3:15 is that God, at the very moment of humanity's fall, promised a future Redeemer who would secure a final, fatal victory over Satan through his own temporary suffering and sacrifices. The emotional tone is one of sovereign hope and gracious reassurance. It transforms a scene of dark rebellion and judgment into a beacon of light. God does not abandon sinners, but has already orchestrated their rescue. The closing invitation focused on trust and surrender. Since God's first prophecy was perfectly fulfilled in the cross and resurrection of Jesus, you're invited to stop hiding in the shame and instead place your confidence in the one who has already defeated your greatest enemy, Jesus Christ.